Welcome. Good afternoon. Good morning. Looking forward to this last conversation. We are closing out our firm series on sales and use tax this afternoon, and really looking forward to our final discussion with a firm who I've been working with for a few years, and a colleague of mine that really is going to be able to share a lot of insights and a lot of feedback and his perspective on the sales and use tax landscape, how firms can be helping their clients with sales and use tax, and around the technology with sales and use tax. So we're very much looking forward to today's discussion. I want to welcome in Craig Kugel from Whitley. And Craig, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll get going with our discussion.
All right, great. Thanks, Marianne. And thanks once again for the invitation here to speak today. I'm very happy to be here on behalf of Whitley. So my name is Craig Kugel. I lead the state and local tax practice of Whitley. I've been involved in state and local tax now for a little over 31 years. And I would say my passion within state and local tax is sales and use tax.
Absolutely. I will second that. Craig is very passionate about sales and use tax, very passionate about educating firms and educating the profession. So we're very lucky to have you on today, Craig. So I want to go ahead and get started with our discussion. And I want to start with today's landscape. So as we look at sales and use tax in the current landscape, a lot has changed over the course of the last few, I would say, short years. We had the Wayfair case, and now we're kind of in this area of uncertainty with the current pandemic. And, I'm curious, Craig, your perspective. What are you experiencing right now within the sales and use tax landscape? And how is that impacting your clients when you look at, what's going on today?
Oh, that's a great question, Marianne. I think now, since we're, well past, 2 years of the Wayfair decision, I'm seeing a lot more of our clients take this a lot more serious, as far as, with 43 of the 45 states having some type of economic nexus provisions. I'm seeing a lot more clients wanting to get up to speed, wanting to become compliant. And maybe it's not with all of the states, right? Maybe it's just with some of their bigger risk states that they're doing business in. But from a client perspective, we're seeing a bigger increase in the amount of nexus studies, taxability determinations, and registrations as well. And just besides maybe the client aspect of it, let's look at the state aspect of it. The states, we all know, are losing or have lost significant amount of money with the COVID pandemic, and they're going to be looking to find ways to make up that lost revenue. And a lot of us in our profession believe that the states are really going to be aggressive once they come out of the pandemic emergency. So I'm already starting to see a little bit of an uptick right now as far as states starting to get their things together, as far as reaching out to clients with respect to nexus notifications, and seeing a lot more activity from a state perspective. But I'm going to take it maybe one step further too, Marianne, where I'm seeing a lot more of the whole Wayfair impact with respect to our clients is really those clients that are going through, say, like an M&A deal. They're looking to sell their business. I've noticed a lot recently on the other side, whether you're on the purchasing side or on the seller side, there's a lot more emphasis today in having produce a nexus study. What is your clients? What have they done? What has this client done in terms of identifying the states that they should be filing in, from a nexus perspective with respect to sales and use tax and other tax types too as well. So, like I mentioned, over the last 6 to 8 months in the M&A deals, I'm seeing a lot more stress, a lot more importance of focusing on the filing requirements. And certainly, every client might not have a filing requirement in all states, but we're seeing a lot more emphasis that in the recent M&A deals.
Craig, you make a great point. And I think too, as we kind of look at the uncertainty that we're in and we're facing, one of the things that when I'm consulting, with firms, is really the importance of having that discussion now and getting out in front of this. We are, seeing an uptick in kind of the aggressiveness within jurisdictions right now to make up for those budget shortfalls. So I think as firms are kind of preparing their clients and oftentimes we're, you hear about the PPP and everything else going on, but don't forget sales tax. I think that's a really important discussion that we should be talking about now. And to that point, that's a really good transition, Craig, into kind of our next topic. And a lot of that is around services. So, throughout this series, throughout this LinkedIn Live series, we've been working and speaking with a lot of firms who are, expanding or evolving their services. And honestly, your firm is no different. When you and I first met 4 or 5 years ago, your practice was very different than that it is today, right? So you focus specifically on your sales and use tax advisory services. Today your practice has changed and your services has changed. And if you don't mind, how has that changed? What does your firm, or what do your services look like today?
Sure. I would say I would definitely agree with you, Marianne. When we first started working together, 4 or 5 years ago, our state and local tax services were focused primarily on advisory. Now we did at that time have a compliance practice within our SALT group within sales and use tax, and we subscribe. Well before we met, Marianne, we subscribed to the Vertex Service Bureau offering. So what we do is we actually use the Vertex Service Bureau offering not only to prepare sales tax returns, but also file those returns electronically in the states that they offer that service in. But what I would say is over the last probably 6 to 8 months, we're seeing an uptick in the number of clients that are reaching out to us and asking us about helping them with their compliance services. And maybe it's having that conversation with the client, say, hey, what is this maybe the best fit for Wifley to prepare your sales tax returns based on the number of states that you should be filing in, or might you want to consider maybe a sales tax technology solution that not only helps you with the taxability of products and certificate management and filing returns, might that be maybe a better option too as well? So that's kind of the whole part of the process. But I would definitely say within our practice, we've seen an uptick in the number of clients reaching out to us and really asking us about, how we can help them out. They're focused today, they're focused on trying to grow the business. They're focused on trying to keep their businesses alive through everything that's happening right now with the COVID pandemic. And the last thing that a lot of businesses want to worry about is filing, the sales and use tax returns or other tax return types too as well. So I would definitely say there's been a big increase, Marianne, as far as on our end, from our compliance practice, the number of clients who are actually doing sales and use tax return filings for today.
Craig, that's a great point. And I think it just, summarizes kind of the landscape you laid out just a few moments ago. And in regards to, because of this landscape, because of Wayfair, and now because of, the uncertainty with this pandemic, we are seeing a shift in client demand and in the services that clients are needing. And I think compliance is a great way to kind of show that, right? Show that transition.
Right.
So, we know that your clients are kind of relying on your firm is truly to kind of step in that trusted advisor role and help them with sales and use tax. But you mentioned, just a few moments ago, technology. You mentioned you had partnered with Vertex. But I'm curious, how are you guys at Wifley advising, providing guidance, and helping your clients understand the role that technology or sales and use tax technology plays within their sales and use tax situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Marianne. And how I would respond to that is, every client is unique. And what I mean by that, every client has a unique situation with respect to what they sell, how they sell to their clients, how they deliver the product. And, whether it's manufacturing or construction or banking or not-for-profit or whatever the case might be, everybody has a different technology. Everyone's using a different technology. Whether it's a technology dedicated for invoicing, if they're on the internet, they're using a different platform. So what I highly recommend is having, a couple of options available with respect to technology to bring forward to your clients, because everybody's situation is unique. On our end, we focus on, we partner with Vertex, but we also will bring in Sovos, because there are going to be situations where maybe Vertex might not be the perfect fit, or maybe Sovos might not be the perfect fit. But I also think it's important to have, 2 or maybe even 3 options available, to bring a technology firm in, because like I said, every situation is a little bit different. And everyone has a little bit different need with respect to, what they're looking for from a sales tax function. Do they need assistance with taxability matrices? Do they need assistance with managing certificates? One of the biggest things that has come out of the whole Wayfair discussion is, years ago, one of our clients or any company might have only been collecting certificates, maybe in their home state, and they really didn't have maybe a good process to put in place to collect certificates in the states that they're doing business in. So now, with respect to Wayfair, one of the things that we're recommending to our clients is really putting process and procedures in place to collect certificates from customers in all states, just in the event that there's an audit somewhere down the road. So with technology, to have that certificate exemption certificate maintenance program, it can be very easy to use as far as tracking and maintaining certificates. So I think from a technology perspective, everybody's situation is different, and it takes a little bit to understand as far as what they need and what they're looking for and how they can be best served. But I strongly believe in having 2 or maybe 3 options available for clients to bring forward to them to evaluate, to see what firm might fit them the best.
Absolutely. And great advice on technology and the role that technology plays. And because it's not just the compliance in terms of getting the returns out. There's the, like you had mentioned, exemption certificates. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that really come together as we think about the role of technology within, a client sales and use tax journey. So as you guys are starting to kind of have discussions with your clients, especially on the compliance side, how are you leveraging, Craig, your knowledge around advisory services and just the time that you guys have spent in the advisory services arena? How are you leveraging that into your compliance discussions?
Marianne, I think that's a great question. I think it's extremely important. I really think it's extremely important to introduce your advisory services into your compliance function. And here's why. So many times when we have a client, we're trying to onboard a client from a compliance perspective, we're always worried about the data, manipulating the data so it can work in our system, whether it's through the CPA Vertex portal or whether it's through, Sovos or whoever it might be. We're so caught up in how to manipulate that data, but how many times do we go behind that data and understand as far as what the clients are actually selling and how they're delivering it to their customers? I think it's really important to understand, from an invoice perspective, getting some sample transactions to see how a customer is actually invoicing a client, because we all know in the sales and use tax area that in a number of states, the taxability of products and services can vary based on how you invoice a customer. And I can't begin to tell you too how many times that where you're working with the client and maybe in the past they're collecting sales tax based on origination, when it's crossing state lines and not destination. So I mean, not only from a certificate, a matrix perspective, you're trying to help mitigate that risk. What procedures does a client have in place to collect and to self-assess and remit use tax to a state? I think that's probably still one of the biggest audit triggers today in the sales and use tax environment, is not self-assessing and paying in use tax. So I mean, having those discussions, Marianne, with the client, just not helping them, just not bringing in their data to prepare returns and file returns with a particular state. But I think it's really important to have those conversations when you're looking at the data, understand what maybe opportunities there might be to help a client out with your advisory practice, so you can kind of mitigate any kind of risk down the road. In most states, an audit could be either 3 years or 4 years from a statute of limitations perspective. And, that decision or that conversation, well, hey, Craig, how come you guys never told us about that? The taxability of this product works this way in a particular state. Or, what, we really didn't have really good procedures in place to collect certificates in states, X, Y, and Z. So I think as a trusted business advisor, not only, helping clients from a compliance perspective, I truly believe the advisory piece is really important in tying everything together and helping mitigate risk for a client, going forward. So they're collecting the proper sales and use tax, in a given state from a customer.
Perfect. And that, that ties into your clients. I can only imagine in your practice, Craig, that you have clients that come to you that are feeling overwhelmed. They really don't understand how to tackle the sales tax obligations that they're facing today. And then obviously kind of going back to that landscape that we talked about, just the uncertainty that's out there. What advice do you have for clients just as they're starting their sales tax journey? What advice do you have for them, and how can they start those conversations with their firm or with their partner?
Marianne, I think the biggest thing is really, where does somebody get started? And I think, you and I have talked about this in the past a number of times, and where we always, when we're looking at trying to help a client, get going, get started, what we always like to do is focus on their bigger risk states first. So obviously getting, that sales by state breakdown as far as where their biggest volume of sales or transactions are on a state by state basis. But I firmly believe in looking at from a mitigation, from a risk perspective, start with your bigger states first. We all know there's, the 43 states that have economic nexus rules, and I've seen it happen a number of times when you try to tackle, 30 states or 35 states all at one time, trying to get somebody set up to get registered. You're looking to do, a nexus study. Maybe it's some voluntary disclosures or whatever the case might be. When you try to tackle 30, 35, 40 states at one time, it can be an administrative burden for your client, just given all the day-to-day functions that they may have otherwise, and you're getting held up on getting things set up in a particular state. But I always recommend, as far as starting, just getting started. Look at your bigger risk states first. And when you're looking at your bigger risk states, I think the key thing is not only look at sales and use tax, but what other tax types are impacted with respect to a company doing business in a particular state. We all know about Wayfair and the rules that the changes it brought in the marketplace over the last 2 years, but physical presence is still a key requisite in helping clients out with understanding where they have nexus, where they have a filing requirement. So when we look at it from a holistic perspective, when we're helping out our clients, it's not only from a sales tax perspective, we're looking at the big picture. We're looking at sales tax, income franchise. Might there be any employment or withholding obligations too as well? So I think, once you get a client started and you look at the bigger risk states first, and you can kind of work down the scale a little bit to those medium states and the lower states. And obviously, from there, when you're helping out your clients, understand where their risk is. Is there risk? How far back does their risk go? Does it go back 1.5 years? Does it go back 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, or whatever the case might be? And making recommendations to them on how to mitigate that risk, because we all know in the sales and use tax area, when we want to pursue, say, like a voluntary disclosure with a particular state, one of the requirements is to not having been registered for that tax type in the past. So the minute you actually register for a state prospectively and ignore the risk for prior years, you've pretty much taken yourself out of a VDA situation. So I think it's really, from start to finish, it's really working with your client to understand where they have a filing obligation, what are the risks, for past years, and then helping them through the whole process and getting them registered, getting them set up, and getting them going on the right path going forward, so they're in compliance.
Excellent advice. As we wrap up our discussion today, Craig, I'm sure there's the firm out there who kind of they hear us, they know it's coming, that pendulum is going to swing, and these jurisdictions are definitely going to come more aggressive. And I think you and I both have communicated that that's probably happening sooner than we expected. But for that firm that's out there that might not have the sales and use tax resources internally in the firm, or really just doesn't have the capability right now to provide sales and use tax services today, what advice can you share, or what advice do you have for them and how they can help their clients?
That's an excellent question, Marianne. So I think, for all the firms that are out there, obviously, what you're looking at to say is, hey, is this a practice that I want to develop and grow? And is this a practice that I want to develop and grow and make money on going forward? And if the decision is, at this time, we're not going to, start a practice internally, think about it in terms of this perspective. As a trusted business advisor to our clients, our clients are looking to us for advice, a lot of times, not only from a tax, from an income tax perspective, but they're also looking to our advice from a sales tax perspective. And there are so many firms out there today that are providing state and local tax services that if we're not proactive with our clients and helping them through their process, there are other companies, there are other firms out there, whether it's an accounting firm or it's a boutique consulting firm or whatever the case might be. They're dying to get in to help out those clients where we're not serving them from a salt perspective. So I think getting back to your question, Marianne, is if the decision is to not, grow that practice internally, how can you look to referral sources? How can you look to your network? How can you look to other firms who might be providing this service that you can bring in to help out through your help out through your specific client situations and work through that angle. And at least in that case, maybe you've decided you're not going to have a salt practice or a sales and use tax practice, but at least you're being proactive with your clients and you're the one that's bringing them this information through introduction with somebody that you trust that can help them out with that particular situation and their needs. So I think, looking through your network, you're looking through, referral sources. I think that's a key thing as part of your overall strategy is if you're not going to service your clients internally with internal resources, how can you do it externally and with people that you can trust that they're going to help your clients out, in that area.
That's a great point, Craig. It's like that story of you never have to say no, right? So if a client asks a question, yes, maybe you can't do it internally, but you don't have to say no. You've got a partnership, you've got a network that you can rely on. So that's excellent advice.
Yeah, hey Marianne, I'd like to maybe say one thing too. I think it's always important too, as far as when somebody else is bringing that opportunity or somebody else is in front of your client bringing that discussion, the question always comes back to if you're the existing accounting firm for that client. Hey, you've been our accounting firm for the last 10 or 15 years. How come you guys have never had a discussion with us? And that's always been probably the most difficult decision to have with any company. It says, why haven't you guys been proactive in bringing the service, to our, in front of us and having that discussion? So again, if you're not going to develop it internally, I highly recommend leveraging it out, working with somebody on the outside to bring that service in and have those discussions with your client.
Excellent point. And as we close up, I just want to throw out the piece around education, right? So all the firms are probably thinking, how do I learn more? How do I get the education that I need? And, I know, Craig, full disclosure, you and I work together in terms of educating firms around a business plan and putting together the pieces around how do you provide sales and use tax services. So if you want to speak a little bit about the education piece, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, from an education perspective, Marianne, along with CPA.com, with Chris Gallo from Bergen KDV, we've put together a workshop to help those companies or help those firms that are looking to get into the sales and use tax area. How can you develop a sales and use tax practice? Maybe it's in the workshop is that actually not only for those individuals who might be the so-called maybe internal champion, the designated internal champion. I think it's really important too for staff and others that are within the SALT group to become exposed to the workshop, because it talks about the opportunities that are out there within the sales and use tax area. We cover billing, we cover the technology piece, we cover the taxability matrices, we cover the ideas that you want to bring forward in front of your client. So I think a workshop or bringing that workshop in to your firm, I think is really important. It gives you kind of the start, because I think that's what we're all looking for as far as those firms that don't have currently a sales and use tax practice. Where do you start? And that's what this education, that's what this workshop is really designed to do, is to give you that start and give you that direction as far as where to go.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. And just to kind of close up, oftentimes I have firms ask me, well, how do I price out my services? Or what do my engagement letters look like? Or how do I staff my practice? These are the kind of topics that we cover in this workshop with these educational materials. So it's just so important for firms to kind of think through their strategy. What does their sales tax strategy look like today? Whether that be what Craig talked about in terms of creating that partnership, creating that network, or truly building out your strategy internally and using the different educational resources that are out there for the profession. So with that, Craig, I know we got to close up today, but obviously anytime you and I sit down and have a discussion about sales and use tax, I take one thing out of it and learn something new every single time. So I thank you for your time this afternoon. I thank you for the insights, the perspective that you've provided. I know that, our audience learned just as much as I did in this short discussion. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mary Ann. Again, thank you, CPA.com, for the opportunity here to speak today. And it's always great to have these sales and use tax conversations.
Absolutely. And thank you to our audience. For those of you that have enjoyed the firm series that we've done, as I mentioned at the beginning, this closes out that series. Hopefully each and every single practitioner, every firm was able to provide you some services. Thank you.